Let's get right into it. Picture this. You are building a massive antitrust case against a billion-dollar merger. You're digging for that one piece of evidence, that smoking gun, to prove they intended to create a monopoly. Now, what if I told you the company just handed it to you, right there in their own public SEC filings? If you're in the world of antitrust law, this is the million-dollar question. Proving what a company intended to do, what was actually going on in the boardroom, is incredibly tough. You're hunting for a documented plan to snuff out the competition. And in the case we're about to unpack, that's exactly what happened. This whole thing is a masterclass in how regulators can take a company's own boring public financial reports and turn them into the star witness in a major antitrust fight. Okay, so let's set the stage. The story here revolves around a company called Edwards Lifesciences, a huge player in the medical device industry. And they had their sights set on dominating a brand new market for heart valve technology. The timing here is everything. In July of 2024, Edwards buys a small company, JC Medical. But then, just days later, it announces this massive, nearly billion-dollar deal for another company, JenaValve. Now, on the surface, it just looks like two separate acquisitions. But fast forward to 2026, and a court forced Edwards to call the whole thing off. The real story is how these two deals were actually just one big illegal plan. So what was the FTC's big argument? It all came down to this idea of a pipeline monopoly. This isn't about competition that exists today. It's about wiping out competition for tomorrow. The FTC said Edwards was systematically buying up the only two other companies in the development pipeline, basically killing any future competition before it even had a chance to get started. And this chart, wow, this shows you exactly what that looks like. Regulators use this thing called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI, to measure how competitive a market is. And as you can see, the market was already pretty concentrated. But after the deals, the HHI would rocket up to 10,000, which is the score for a literal perfect monopoly. For regulators, that's not just a red flag. That is a 5-alarm fire. So the question is, how did Edwards think they were going to pull off what the FTC basically called a merger to monopoly? Well, their strategy was pretty bold. They tried to hide one of the key deals right out in the open. And here's the really wild part. The FTC didn't need a secret whistleblower or some leaked email chain to crack this case. All the proof they needed was right there, available to anyone, in the company's mandatory reports to the SEC. So let's zero in on the exact document that blew this whole thing wide open. We're talking about Edwards Lifesciences Form 10-Q, which is just their standard quarterly financial report. Okay, so take a look. This is a direct clip from that 10-Q filing. You can see it, clear as day. It openly announces the deal to acquire JenaValve technology. Nothing to see here, right? Seems totally normal at first. But now check this out. This is from the exact same document. The other acquisition for JC Medical, JenaValve's only competitor in clinical trials, is also mentioned. But look at how it's described. Not by name. It's just some vague, early-stage medical device company. Why name one and hide the other? That difference, that's the whole case right there. And this just lays it out side by side. The nearly billion-dollar JenaValve deal, it's announced by name, loud and proud. The much smaller but strategically crucial JC Medical deal, it's deliberately made anonymous. So you have to ask yourself, why would you disclose two deals happening at the same time in such different ways? The FTC argued this was no accident. It was a strategy. But this wasn't just about tricky wording, no. The strategy was actually built right into the financial plumbing of the deal itself. And to get why that matters, we need to quickly talk about the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act, or HSR. Think of it as the government's main tripwire. It's a law that says if a deal is over a certain size, you have to report it for an antitrust review before it can close. It's how regulators stop bad deals before they happen. So in 2024, that magic number, that HSR tripwire, was $119.5 million. Anything over that, and the government gets to take a look. And guess what the upfront price was that Edwards paid for JC Medical? $115 million. Just squeaking in, right under that line. Now, there were future payments involved too, but that upfront price seems like it was surgically designed to avoid triggering that mandatory government review. So, was that just a coincidence? Yeah, the FTC and the court were not buying that for a second. They saw this as crystal clear evidence that Edwards intentionally structured the deal to fly under the radar and quietly roll up the entire market. And the court completely agreed. And this whole thing had very real consequences. Gina Valve's own leadership testified that they were totally blindsided. They said they never would have sold to Edwards if they had known that their only real competitor had been secretly bought up just a day before. That's a huge deal. So, after all that, what are the big takeaways here? Especially for those of us who work in the antitrust and M&A space, this case is a massive lesson. First lesson, never ever underestimate what's in a public SEC filing. Sometimes they can be even more damning than a private email. Second, any inconsistencies in how you report things are going to be a huge red flag. Regulators are laser focused on that and on any deal that conveniently lands just south of the HSR threshold. Third, this whole pipeline monopoly idea, it is clearly a top priority for the FTC right now. But really, the single biggest lesson is this. This case proves that the way you disclose and structure a deal can be the most powerful evidence of your true intent.
It really leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? You know, as deals get more and more complex, you have to wonder, where's the next smoking gun hiding? Because as this case just proved, sometimes it's sitting right there in the open for absolutely everyone to see.